Back here on SportsLine, talking about the Titans, talking about their loss on Sunday in Pittsburgh, and the fact that they have less than 48 hours now to get ready, get suited up, and get back out on the field for Thursday night football. 7:20 kickoff at Nissan Stadium against a 49ers team that's won 5 of the last 6 now and will come to Nashville as a road favorite. Phone lines still open, 737-7767 if you'd like to jump in. But after that 4-turnover performance in which the Titans were outscored 16-0 in the second half against the Steelers on Sunday, third loss in 4 games. The Titans now 9-5 on the season, just a game up on the Colts in the AFC South. Magic number still sitting at 2 to clinch the division. And now they sit third. Had the chance to potentially be first at the end of the weekend with the win. Beat the Steelers, Titans would be the number 1 seed in the AFC right now. Instead, they sit third with a lot of work to do. Here was our instant reaction on the Electric Power Company's Sunday Sports Central Sunday night with former Titan great Keith Bullock and Jonathan Hutton of Outkick. All right, guys, the recipe for the Titans to win this game was there. They ran the ball effectively. The defense was stingy. But this is now 13 turnovers in 3 losses here. And, Keith, they're coming from everybody.
Yeah, look, you got the quarterback, you got the running back, you got the tight ends, the wide receiver, and today they had 3 of those turnovers spanning 10 plays in the third and fourth quarter. Look, the defense is doing a great job. Definitely going to need more from the offense. Defense is holding the opposing offense to 3s, even off the turnovers, and our offense is going to have to give more than 3 points when they have opportunities.
And, Keith, those turnovers are leading to huge problems on the scoreboard after halftime because they didn't score in the second half today. They didn't score in the second half against New England. They were blanked against Houston, all losses, and all were games that were fully capable of being controlled and games the Titans should have won. And Vrabel gives a sermon on turnover margin every week. And, Steve, this offense is not practicing what he's preaching.
No, they're not, and they better figure it out right away to get the offense going and stop turning it over, because after an 8-2 start, that's 3 losses in 4 games and a division race that's getting uncomfortably tight. It was hard to imagine when the Titans were 8-2, having recently swept the Colts, that they could be in this position where potentially the division could be up for grabs, and they still have a great chance to close this thing out. The Colts have to go to an Arizona team that's going to be absolutely stomping mad on Sunday after the absolute egg they just laid in Detroit. And Arizona still is one of the best football teams in the league, you have to imagine, given the way that they played all season long. They also have the Raiders, who played better football and are playing desperate down the stretch here before the end of the season. So it's entirely likely that the Colts lose a game before the end of the season. The Titans still have the Texans at the end, which is a game that, although they didn't win the first time around, they really should be able to take care of. Gosh, if they got swept by the Texans, so am I. But, you know, it would take that type of collapse for the Titans to not win the division. But all of a sudden, that type of collapse doesn't seem all that out of the realm of possibility when you're turning the ball over 4 times a week. And that's the situation where the Titans are right now. Phone lines open, 737-7767, the number. We say hello to Kevin. Kevin, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Appreciate you taking my call. I talked to you last week, and I believe I kind of opened with mention that Lawan, was glad that he was not hurt again. And I don't think people should start picking on this guy, because I wish the rest of the people on that offensive line had the heart he has, because he's a beast, and all he wants to do is win, and he will sacrifice everything for a win. And so the people that I know people like to target him, but I think it's a little unfair, but I'll get away from that. And of course the Titans will never go away from the run. It's kind of in their DNA. And as I mentioned last week, offensive linemen love it. They love when they can block for their running back and be successful. It just I don't know if it pumps that much adrenaline in them. I'm not an offensive lineman, but I've watched enough football to know that really gets them going. And especially yesterday, one thing I want to bring up, with all the turnovers, I can't believe the time of possession was, I guess it was basically, I think the Titans had the ball for 40 minutes to Pittsburgh's 20 minutes, somewhere in their equation.
It was 39:08 to 21:52. So.
And usually when you see that kind of possession with those kind of turnovers, you would expect to see the team with the 20 minutes to have a whole lot more points, because usually turnovers turn into quick points. It's an expression that I've pegged with a couple of friends of mine, is going Manning on a team, because Manning, whenever they the defense would cause a turnover, Peyton Manning would instantly go for the bomb.
Sure.
And I couldn't believe how often he was successful at it. I mean, still to this day, it shocks me how successful he was. Now, my question is this. Throughout the season that I've been watching, the officiating has been just crazy. I've seen calls being made that I kind of scratch my head and go like, why would you call that? How could that possibly be interference or holding? I don't know if you caught the game last night with Chicago, but one of the Chicago defensemen was going and made an awesome tackle in the backfield and got called for that crazy penalty of, I guess they call it a chop block.
Yeah.
And I was shocked to see that, because that could have changed the game for the poor Chicago Bears. Well, the Chicago Bears ain't all that great this season, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I'd like to at least hear your comments on the officiating this season. And I appreciate your time. Have a good evening, sir.
Yeah, you bet. I think you make some good points there. I don't know when it comes to officiating. They have a really difficult job. This is a sport that moves incredibly quickly. You got 22 guys on the field on every play. It's difficult to get them all right, but you want them to get it right more than they have. And I don't think this has been a great year for the officiating. And frankly, even from a Titans perspective on Sunday in Pittsburgh, this isn't the chief reason they lost the game, but there were definitely some calls in that game that went against them. And people are going to immediately point to the Jeffrey Simmons hit around the knees of Ben Roethlisberger on the roughing the passer, as they called it, that wiped away the one turnover the Titans defense was able to get in the game. I think that's going to get called almost all the time, though. Whether by the letter of the law he got pushed and that actually propelled him in and therefore it should have been nullified, just the way it happened, the space between where he was engaged and where he ended up and where he hit Roethlisberger low, I think that's getting called 99 times out of 100. So I'm not surprised at all there. But if you want to really complain about something, if you're a Titans fan, talk about the one sustained drive that the Steelers had the entire game. The touchdown drive in the third quarter. Titans are up by 10. They're still dominating. They'd only turned the ball over once at this point. And the very first play of the drive, the Steelers tried to take a shot. And Buster Skrine nearly comes up with an interception. There was a clear hold up front on the Steelers' offensive line against Jeffrey Simmons that got called, but mysteriously they also threw a flag down the field on Skrine for pass interference. I've looked at this play time and time again. I can't find any level of pass interference on Buster Skrine. There was a little bit of hand fighting from both guys, but it went back and forth. That is absolutely a play on, and Skrine by the end of the play looked more like the intended receiver than the Steelers receiver did. That is a terrible call. A terrible call. And it changed the complexion of the drive, because if that flag doesn't come down, it's 1st and 20 for the Steelers. And given the way that they'd moved the ball in that game and where they were on the field, they would have been inside their own 20-yard line. That is in almost all likelihood a punt 3 plays later. And the Titans will end up in better field position than they ultimately had. But what happened is instead it stays at 1st and 10. It's a do-over. The Steelers are able to get a first down, and then they get into a third down situation. They convert that barely, but then you get a personal foul penalty on Christian Fulton, who was trying to dislodge the football. It wasn't helmet to helmet. I don't know what they're calling there, but they called him for a personal foul. It stinks that Pat Freiermuth ended up with a concussion, but I think his concussion actually either came from the Zach Cunningham hit on the back end of it or his head hitting the ground after the hit. I don't think it had anything to do with Christian Fulton's hit. So I don't understand where that penalty comes from. That moves the Steelers down inside the 35-yard line. One decent play. They take a shot at the end zone, and now you have a pass interference called on Christian Fulton. Again, it's hand fighting. They're going after it. This is probably the most acceptable of those 3 calls, but it could very easily be nothing. And Fulton's been terrific this year. He probably deserves the benefit of the doubt. But instead, it's 1st and goal, Steelers at the 1 because of the pass interference in the end zone. Ultimately, on 3rd down, Big Ben was able to sneak it in. But instead of the Titans maybe, if just the first call was right, instead of the Titans maybe forcing a punt a few plays later and getting good field position in their own right, You have these calls stacked on top of each other. The Steelers ultimately get their only touchdown of the afternoon. It's a 13-10 game, and the Titans start the next drive backed up, at their own 25-yard line after a touchback. That is a game-swinging type of deal, and it comes from the officials. And again, that's not why the Titans lost, but the officials have got to be better than they have been this year. And you can certainly point to plays here or there that have made major differences in games. And if you're the Titans, Kevin Byard said after the game, he said he thought most of the calls, to be quite honest, were, quote, BS. And I think on that drive, he's got a point. I think the Titans should be very, very disappointed with how that drive played out and how it did change the rest of the game. Now, hold on to the football, and it probably doesn't matter, but it definitely changed the course of the game. It made things tighter than it should have been at that point because of a couple of missed calls. All right, phone lines are still open if you want to get in here. We'll take another break. We'll come back. More analysis, more of your calls after this here on SportsLine on News Channel 5+.